Hey fellas, Meat Trapper here, and it's another hot summer day in the free state of Alabama. I tell you, it's getting hotter, and I'm about ready for some cool weather and hunting and trapping season. Summertime just is not my favorite time of the year. But anyway, what I'm going to talk to you today about is a powered foot snare, specifically a triggering mechanism that you can use to make a powered foot snare. Now there are a lot of powered foot snares on the market. Belial makes one, Fremont makes a snare thrower. There are a variety of others out there. Most of those are built or centered around some sort of steel trap, and they're also fairly expensive. The Fremont and the Belial, they run about $40 a piece, so it's more expensive than just buying a regular steel trap. And what I'm going to show you today is how to make one of these things yourself for very little money. And what I'm going to be using to power the snare is a silicone band. You can use surgical tubing, you can use a bungee cord, but what I'm going to use is something that I had laying around the house, and that's one of those exercise bands, that stretchy thing that you use to build your muscles up and all of that. And it's going to use a modern aircraft cable snare. The trigger is just made out of a piece of 11 gauge trapping wire, and it's held onto the tree with a nail. And then it just has a trip wire that you can use fishing line or whatever else to trigger it. Very, very simple, very cheap, and it works good. So anyway, let's take a look. One last thought before we get started. One of the reasons that I'm big on powered foot snares is most of the time when we're trapping or snaring, it's wintertime and the weather's cold. And if an animal wraps around a tree or self-dispatches, that's really not a problem if you're snaring fur. And it's not a problem if you're snaring for meat, as long as the weather's cold enough. But in a survival situation or a grid down situation, it may be 100 degrees like it is today. And if your animal wraps around a tree and self-dispatches, by the time you get there, that meat may be long gone. It may be inedible. By foot snaring, using a powered foot snare, the animal's going to be alive when you get there. It's one way that you can guarantee, or just about guarantee, that animal is going to be in perfect shape when you get to it. And a non-target catch can be released. It's difficult to do it, but it can be done. So anyway, with that said, let's get started. Okay, here's the heart of the system, the trigger. Now I want you to take a good look at what I've got here. I've got a good sized nail driven into the side of the tree. The trigger is made from a piece of 11 gauge trap wire. You could use coat hanger wire or what have you, and it is simply got a bend in it where it has an eye where it will rotate freely around the nail. That's important. It's got to be free to rotate. Now you come up a few inches and you can see it's got a U-shaped bend in it. That's what's going to engage the ring on our silicone band. And it comes up a little bit more, it's got another bend, and that's where the trip wire is going to attach, is right there. Now the critical thing on this trigger, number one, this has to be free to rotate this direction, and the eye in the trigger has to be free enough to be pulled, because when the animal hits the trip wire, it's going to pull it this direction. So it has to have good play in it, both this way and that way. So make this nice and big, give yourself plenty of slop, plenty of play, and this, by moving this in and out, is how we're going to adjust the tension on the trip wire. So this right here is the most important part. Make sure you get that right. Everything is downhill from there. If this isn't right, then you're just going to have problems. Now your snare has to have a way to be powered shut, and you could use a spring. You can buy surgical tubing off of Amazon. If you have a good stretchy bungee cord, you could use that. What I'm using is one of these exercise bands. I had this laying around the house, and this is one of those things that you stretch out and build your muscles up so you get big and strong and look good on the beach. And now, depending upon the stretchiness of your material, depending upon the length of your material, you're going to have to play with where to attach it, how many turns to wrap it. And the idea is this is going to come down and hook down here, and you need a lot of stretch. You want a good stretch pulling up to get that snare closed around the animal's foot very fast and pulled up as high as possible on their leg. You don't want them caught around the toe, you want them caught up on the wrist. So this is important. Like I say, you're just going to have to play with this and get it to where you are comfortable with it, and just practice. Now what I've got here is two trees with a game trail going between them. If you'll notice, the trigger and the cord are all on the inside facing the other tree. They're not wrapped around here or over here, over here. Everything is in here where that snare is going to go, right in here. You want that thing yanked straight up. So we've got our engine right here. There's the engine that's going to drive the snare. We've got our trigger set. So now we have to put our snare in and our tripwire. So let's take a look at that. Now hopefully you can see this. I've got my snare loop set in the middle of the game trail, and I've tried to rake the leaves away and use an untreated snare so that it shows up good on the camera. You can use any snare that you want, any diameter cable, any type of cable. It does not matter. You don't have to load them. You don't have to get fancy or anything. I just put a little bend in mine right here just so that I get a good coverage area. Now in my state, the loop is limited to 6 inches. So if I were setting this for real, I would have to make that loop a little bit smaller. But other than that, you just have to go by what's illegal in your state. Now we have to attach the snare to the cord so that when the trap fires, it's going to yank it shut. But this is an important point. If you've ever snared, you know just how hard an animal can fight a snare while he's alive. So you don't want the animal restrained only by this cord, because he's not going to be there when you get there. What you want to do is you want to attach an extension cable, and you can see that snare is attached to an extension cable that goes across, and it's secured to that tree. That tree is what's going to hold the animal, not this little cord right here. One thing that I am going to experiment with is breakaway devices, so that I can attach the snare to the cord with a breakaway device, so that once the trap is triggered, it'll break away from that ring and just be attached to that tree, and that'll spare wear and tear on my cord. So we'll see. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this attached and get the trigger set. You can see I've got that serves sort of as a safety right there. I've just got that cord pulled down and just hung on that nail. So let's go ahead and get it all set. All right, you can see our tripwire is hooked up right there. You can see the trigger is engaged on that ring. Now if you weren't using one of these, if you just had a piece of surgical tubing, all you'd have to do is just tie it to a split ring or a key ring. You could make one out of wire, whatever you want to do, it doesn't matter. But now there's some give, seeing that tripwire, so we need to tighten that up. In this case, all you have to do is slide this closer to the tree to take the slack up. You can get that set where it's a hair trigger, ready to go. You can see that's taking the slack out of that. You just want to make sure your snare loop is directly under the tripwire so that when the animal springs the trap, their foot is in there. What's going to happen when he hits the tripwire, it's going to pull this direction. That's going to disengage the ring from that little notch right there. It will spring upwards, closing the snare around his leg. So let's take a look at it in action. Okay, we're going to put the stick in the center of the snare to simulate the animal's leg, and then we're going to trip the tripwire and see what happens. You can see that caught him and yanked it good and high. I mean, that when he's in there, that's gonna pull that leg all the way up. He's I don't know if you can see that, but he is caught tight, real tight. And then at this point, he is restrained by the tree on the far side over there. Well, I hope that was interesting. That's a neat little triggering system, and you can adapt it any way you wish. I'm a big believer in getting out and experimenting and trying new things, especially during the off season. When it's 100 degrees outside, there's not a whole lot of trapping and hunting going on. Now is the time to be doing stuff like this. And if you're interested in topics like this, and you haven't taken a look at the SD bucket snare video that is for sale on my website, I'd urge you to do so. The SD bucket snare trap is a truly neat thing. It's a very flexible device, and I think it's something that everybody should know how to do. So you can check it out, meattrapper.com. Take a look at it. If you're interested in stuff like this, you'll probably enjoy that video greatly. Today is the 4th of July, Independence Day. This video will probably go up in a week or so when I finish editing it. But happy Independence Day to everyone out there. I have a good friend in Norway, Nick, and he is married to a lovely British lady, Davida. And they were kind enough to send me a picture of a Union Jack labeled Happy Treason Day, you ungrateful colonial. So all I can say, Davida, is after your Brexit vote, you're a traitor too. Welcome to the club. And just remember, any club that would have me as a member, I don't want to be a part of. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.